Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Iris Fox, and I want to extend a warm welcome to the Rough Edges podcast. Rough Edges exists to provide mental health education as well as faith-based messages in order to inspire growth and foster healing. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create a voice for those who wish to discover more about these topics. My hope is that this podcast will not only shed light on mental health issues, but will also reveal the intersection between faith and mental illness in order to bring growth and healing in our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. Today, I am joined by a very, very special guest. She is my sister, Sam Fox. Sam is a rising junior who is studying film at Fordham University. She's a huge Sonic and The Lion King fanatic, but she also loves reading, singing, and writing in her spare time. Welcome on the podcast, Sam.
Hi, it's such an honor to be here. I'm really excited to be here. Such a dream.
Oh, thank you, Sam. Well, I am excited to have you here. And so I want to start off by getting to know you a little bit better. So, what are 3 things that you are passionate about and why?
That's a hard question. I am passionate about a lot of things. But for starters, the one most important things that I'm passionate about is my relationship with God. That is really passionate to me because I'm not perfect, but I want to have like a good connection and relationship with God. And trials and tribulations come, and I really want to perfect that. So that's one thing. You already said it, but Sonic, I love him. My beloved. And of course, The Lion King and my family. I'm really passionate about that. So yeah, and also writing too. But yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. I really love your enthusiasm, especially for the 2 media that you've described, like Sonic and The Lion King, which are 2 incredible properties that we are going to be actually talking about today. But before we get into the discussion, I want to know, like, kind of a general question, like, in your opinion, does the media give an accurate portrayal of mental health? Why or why not?
Well, it depends on certain types of media. Like, for example, like there's some movies, there are some shows that don't primarily represent mental health in a positive light, and some do. So I guess it kind of focuses on where audience members drawn closer to. Because if you have a big production and they get too much,
like notoriety?
Yeah, exactly. Like the more you have more views, more popularity, the better, the higher chance that, the show can have bad representation because of all that fame, right? So it can be a bit of a pickle, and it can be very unbalanced, especially in 2023. You're starting to see this wave of like up and down based on different representations with mental health. So it's kind of fishy right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, especially like you said, like sometimes like the bad like representations, they just kind of, just get a lot of popularity, especially if they're just, like popular. So if a lot of people watch that specific type of media, regardless of whether it's good or bad, the bad ones usually get a lot more recognition
Right,
than the
right.
good ones.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And
yeah.
really bad.
Yeah. Like very, very bad. And it paints a really bad picture of like people who have mental health conditions and want to get better. It paints them in a light that it's like, oh, there's really no hope for them actually overcoming, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah, so in light of that, we're actually going to talk about a really, really excellent film that just showcases a lot of different themes that cover like mental health, healing, and everything else. And of course, that movie that we are talking about is The Lion King, specifically the 1994 version, the original Lion King. We're not
Yes.
talking about the quote unquote remake in 2019. So just to be clear, it's The Lion King. And I'm going to quickly read the synopsis, but before I do, I want to say that if you haven't seen it, I mean, who hasn't seen this one? But if you haven't seen it, we will be talking about spoilers. So keep your eyes out for, spoiler topics for the main plot of the movie. So if you haven't seen it, I suggest you go watch the movie, pause this, watch the movie, come back, and hear our discussion. But now I'm going to read the synopsis of The Lion King. This Disney animated feature follows the adventures of the young lion Simba, played by Jonathan Taylor Thomas, the heir of his father Mufasa, played by James Earl Jones. Simba's wicked uncle Scar, played by Jeremy Irons, plots to usurp Mufasa's throne by luring father and son into a stampede of wildebeests. But Simba escapes, and only Mufasa is killed. Simba returns as an adult, played by Matthew Broderick, to take back his homeland from Scar with the help of his friends Timon, played by Nathan Lane, and Pumbaa, played by Ernie Sabella. So, my first question for you, Sam, is what were three of your favorite moments from the film?
Woo, that is very hard because I love the film so much.
She's like the
Um,
whole movie.
yeah, exactly. But my favorite, like some of my favorite moments, I can go from, I guess, from like the beginning to the end of the movie. So like my first favorite aspect of the film is literally the beginning.
Mm.
I think it's just too iconic.
Yes.
Especially because it's just like it just rises with the sun.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why I like it not only is the animation beautiful, but the fact that the sun is so symbolic throughout the entire film, because Mufasa's like everything the light touches is in our kingdom, and we started out with the sun. So I really love how, metaphoric the film really is. And so, it literally lit up the entire like aspect of what we are supposed to see. And so I really, really like that opening sequence. Another scene that I really like is when Nala and Simba have their talk after Can You Feel the Love Tonight. The reason why I like that scene so much, not only because the score, because I love Hans Zimmer, and I listen to like the soundtrack almost like 25 times in a day.
I can verify.
But no, I just think it really encapsulates the two, especially what their goals were, especially after seeing each other for so long. And then we just talk about, you really need to come back, like that was her passion, like that's what her goal was. And his goal was straying away from his path. So I think that connection and that talk, although it was short, but it really, really, like really dove deep into me. And another scene I liked, my favorite scene of all time would definitely have to be where Simba is walking up the rock. I can go into depth about so many symbols and metaphors, because it just shows that although people just watch it, just see, oh my gosh, like is this in slow motion and an ant and a lion is up there going on a rock. Wow, that's so cool. But it's like so much deeper than that, because it's like every step that he takes, it's kind of like this step to his lifetime through that moment.
Ooh.
Because he's like, I just can't wait to be king. And like now
Wow.
he's king, and like he finally got, to reach that point in his life. And he's like, okay, this is it. And like there's like this moment where he stops and like the rain is falling on him, and then he looks up to the sky, where usually where the sun is in the sky. And then so Mufasa's like, remember. And so I think that scene is just so powerful because he actually remembered who he was, not because he's the son of Mufasa, but because this is like who he is, where he grew up, and like that is his home. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Like the first question, and she's already dropping knowledge. Like, wow.
No.
We can all go home now.
Well, this is what happens when you watch the movie like 10,000 times.
Yeah, no,
So.
no, seriously. I really love like the reasons why you chose those specific scenes, because I especially didn't really catch on to like the sun metaphor of like, how heavily it was used to portray like not only like territorial, because like, Mufasa was saying everything the light touches is our kingdom, but
Right.
also just like the hope that the sun kind of symbolizes, because
Right.
I mean, we'll get into it later, but the land became desolate, when Simba was like in isolation from his home.
Right.
And, and at the end, it brilliantly shows like he came back home and it's all rejuvenated. Life is renewed again. And the sun is back up in the sky,
Yeah.
So I really love that. And I especially love your analysis just now about the ending, like when Simba goes up and ascends to Pride Rock to really claim his territory as king, and he just, it's like it's a very, very powerful scene, not only because you see the triumph, but because like you said, you see the hesitation in Simba a little bit, because he's like, wow, like this is finally happening, like I can't believe that this is actually going on. And then Mufasa's just like, hey, remember, like
Yes.
like we came too far, like you got to do this now,
Right.
And so I just love that, and I love your depiction of like every step that he is taking is just the steps of his lifetime. Like he's been waiting for this moment.
Right.
Like literally the song is like, I just can't wait to be king.
Exactly.
So like he's been like anticipating this moment, even though he lost his way a little bit. Like he was still, part of him was still like, you know what, this is my home. I'm going to fight for it, and this is my kingdom, and I am going to be the king. So I just love that. Ooh, that was beautiful. And so the next question I kind of want to ask, I mean, you touched on like, a little bit, but which moments do you think accurately depicted mental health, like in your opinion?
Ooh. Okay. This is kind of tough because I would say there have been lots of moments in The Lion King that touched upon mental health. I mean, not necessarily in the first movie, but like as you can see a little bit in the second movie, Simba's Pride, and Lion King 1.5. I'll touch on Lion King 1.5 first. So one part that I noticed when although Simba was being like very rambunctious to Timon and Pumbaa as a child, and there was just this one time where he woke up Timon, and Timon's like, what do you have against the concept of a good night's sleep? And he's like, I had a bad dream. And that made me look and think that, like, some people would think, oh, kids have bad dreams. But I firmly believe he had a dream about his father's death in that moment. Because it's like all the times, he would like joke around, but that time it was serious, and it really had a toll on him. And you can see in the emotion with him, he felt bad about saying I had a bad dream.
Mm.
And I feel like that kind of really depicts PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder,
Mm-hmm.
because as someone who is like diagnosed with it, I do have bad dreams and flashbacks
Mm.
of those moments as well. So, and I also sometimes feel ashamed as
Mm.
well to talk about it, because it's like I should have moved on.
Mm.
So it's kind of like I had a bad dream, you know, like he felt bad. And so I think it's very important that Timon not only said, "Oh my gosh, it's just a bad dream, like you'll get over it." He actually reconciled with him and said, "You know what? Come sleep with us." And I feel like that's a good representation, because there are a lot of people out there who really have a hard time expressing their trauma,
Mm.
and they get feet like backlash so much about, you could get over it, why haven't you got over this thing yet, or this
Mm.
person. And it's really hard to like own up to it and say like, I'm dealing with this, I'm struggling with this. And the fact that the writers and the animators thought that, you know, even though Timon is like, you know, there for comedy, this is like the one time he was like serious. And
Mm.
I feel like that is good representation.
Oh, just to be clear, she was talking about Lion King 1.5, which is like a prequel to the original Lion King. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And now I'm talking about Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. And there's this one scene where Simba is adult Simba,
Mm-hmm.
and he is still having this trauma, and he's
Mm.
having a nightmare again. And so I think it's interesting that Simba as a child, he said he had a bad dream. And in
Mm.
the first movie, where Scar was like, I killed Mufasa. Like that
Mm-hmm.
scene, that was another trigger, and he was a young adult.
Mm-hmm.
And now Simba is a full fleshed adult. And
Mm.
it's like the 3 cycles of his life, this trauma is still there.
Mm.
And throughout this nightmare, it's just like, you know, he wished he could, you know, save his father, and
Mm-hmm.
Scar held him back. And that's literally what happened in the first movie. Like Scar held him back from
Mm.
thinking about his father, because Scar made him think that it was his fault. So the
Mm.
fact that Scar kept pulling him back from that moment, it's just the fact that he keeps thinking about it and thinking about it. Because I also think it's because of that guilt,
Mm-hmm.
because of what Scar placed on his emotions, saying that, you know, this is all your fault. So it's,
Mm-hmm.
although he knows now as an adult that it was Scar, he still holds that guilt inside him. And that was very good representation of how like sometimes trauma just doesn't go away.
Mm.
And sometimes it's so deep and hard, especially when you have it as a child.
Yeah.
It can go with you for a lifetime.
Mm.
Not saying that you as an adult having PTSD, like if you get it as an adult, it's not as bad. It's just the fact that as a child, it
Mm-hmm.
would really ruin,
It sticks with you.
it sticks with you for
Mm-hmm.
a while. And I think that is represented so well than anything.
Wow. Like I didn't even realize the connection between all 3 movies like that. Like, girl, she is a Lion King fanatic. Like, I did not see that. But now that you explain it, I'm just like, wow, that is like so true, because Simba was triggered in those moments, you know?
Mhm.
And even in the Lion King 1.5, like, we didn't know exactly what the dream was, but you
Mhm.
can infer that he was dreaming about his dad, because in the Lion King 2, he's still dreaming about his dad
Right.
and the wildebeest situation and like how he died. Like, he's still dreaming about it, even though he has a child. He's
Mhm.
married to Nala, and his daughter Kiara is like a full grown adult too. So
Right.
he's like well in his ages. I don't know like cat age, but I assume that he's like way older than he was like in the original Lion King, and he's still dreaming about his father, you
Right.
know? So I really love that connection, because it kind of shows that, like you said, like even as a kid, like you experience something traumatic. And a lot of the times as children, like I'm not a mental health professional by any means, but I firmly believe like as a kid, you don't know how to process those heavy emotions, right? So
Right.
it gets suppressed at one point.
Mhm.
and it's kind of put into your subconscious. Then as an adult, different things start coming up. Like the trauma manifests itself in
Right.
different ways. And
Mhm.
then when you finally realize, oh, the thing that happened to me like way back when, that was a traumatic experience, you know? And I really think like, wow, even across the Lion King trilogy, they're exploring like the ways that trauma can manifest itself in children.
Right.
So I
Mhm.
really like that.
Absolutely. It's very accurately depicted. Especially me being a trauma survivor, I
Mm,
know what that feels like. And I think that's the reason why I'm such a fanatic, is because it's just so accurately depicted. And I just see Simba through me, and I'm
mm.
like, well, I know at the end of the day he doesn't like overcome this because it starts to become a reoccurring thing. And even in the Lion Guard, it came
Oh
up
Lord.
again. And
We're going across all the Lion King properties.
but it just goes to show that it never ends.
Mm,
I'm not saying that it can't end. Like, there are things to help, but with situations this deep, instilled in your life, your emotions, your brain, your mental health, it can really shape you
mm,
into this closeted person, and so full of isolation
mm.
and not wanting to go back. It's just, I completely understand where he's coming from, because nobody wants to go back to thinking about their traumatic experience,
Right.
because yeah. And so I feel like that it was depicted really well.
Yeah. I mean, even as you frame it like Simba as a character, and I just want to like say to your point about it never goes away. Like while yes, sometimes that may be true, but the goal is to heal, is not to be
Right.
like cured. You know what I
Right,
mean?
absolutely.
Because in this world, like this world is fallen and it's broken. I'm not saying that God doesn't work any miracles and people don't get fully and completely healed, but
Mhm.
sometimes all you got to do is just take it one day at a time.
Right,
Like all you
exactly.
have to do is just like know, okay, God, I'm trusting that you are going to heal me, but it's just like, like you got to be able to just move forward and not really focus on like, okay, I want this to be completely gone.
Right.
The next question that I want to really ask you, I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how has The Lion King, specifically the first film, we're going to keep it to the first film, but how has the film helped you get in touch with your own mental health?
That is a very interesting question, because there's so many life lessons that you can take from the film. As we know, Akuna Matata, it means no worries. So just having a life without worry, it's just very, very intriguing, because every day you wake up, like as soon as you wake up in the morning, I know
Mm.
for me, like the first thing I do, I turn off my alarm, and I'm just in my bed, and I'm looking up at the ceiling, and I'm like, God, thank you for today. And I pray that nothing happens to me when I take the New York City subway. Like,
Mm.
that's like the first thing that comes into
No, but
my
that's valid.
mind.
That's valid. From those who are actually from New York, y'all know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so it's just like all these worries, and especially
Mm.
me lately. Like, I'm getting ready for finals right now, and
Oh,
I'm just a wreck. And I'm
yeah.
like, God, like, what are you doing? Like, what's happening? And my life is just constantly filled with worry, and especially because I'm also diagnosed with like social anxiety. It's like my life. I'm filled with worry. So
Mm.
just trying to think of having a life without worry, it makes me stop like thinking so much, deep into it so quickly.
Mm.
Because I'm such a huge overthinker. Um, but I'm not saying thinking about like a life without worry is not gonna make me stop overthinking. No. I'm gonna keep overthinking, but try to dial it down a little bit and to just take life one day at a time. I think that was another message. And one of my favorite messages that helped me with my mental health, and I've been saying this to all my friends and close loved ones, and they know who they are, but uh every time somebody's going through something, I always send them that gif of Rafiki saying, the past can hurt, but the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it. And that just always just sticks with me, because every day I look into that and I'm like, wow, like my past trauma, I can either run from it or learn from it. And I realized throughout my 20 years of living, I've been running from it. Have I really been learning from it? And sometimes we're too scared to learn from it because we don't want to like think about it all over again to figure out how we can learn from something like that. So it's really deep, because it's like also thinking how you can learn from it is also in a state where you can overcome it. Like, not just learn to learn, like, okay, yeah, that bad thing happened. It wasn't my fault. It was the other person's fault. And I'm learning from this to get better. But it's also to just mostly overcome it. And another one is you know, I have this shirt. I have so many Lion King shirts and merchandise. But one of my tank tops is "Remember Who You Are." And I like wearing that, even though it's a tank top. I still wear it in the winter. But every time I see it, I'm just reminded of the "Remember Who You Are" score that Hans Zimmer composed. And it's just from the scene where Simba's talking with Nala to where he's like, I'm going back, and then Rafiki's just so excited. So that whole time, just the score, and I listen to it daily, and it just reminds me that I should be reminded of like who I am as a person. And especially because I'm going through a lot of mental health issues, especially dealing with PTSD and OCD and my anxiety and my depression. Although I am diagnosed with those things, I'm still reminded of who I am, because it's like those don't really define me. And like, I'm a child of God, and so I need to keep reminded that although these trials and tribulations come my way, like, I am still a child of God. And I think that scene where Simba's looking into the reflection, he's just like, that's not my father. And Rafiki's like, no, look harder, he lives in you. And like, that hits, because I see myself as Simba. I'm like, that's not God. Like, God is not a puddle of water. Like, you know what I'm saying? And he's like, no, God lives in you. And it's really deep, because it's like, once you have God in your heart and the Holy Spirit living inside you, you are living in him. You're living through him. And I think that's important, especially Christians who watch The Lion King, like myself and you, and probably many others who are listening. It's just that constant reminder, like, no matter what hardships may be thrown at you, you need to remember who you are. Like, you're a child of God. You're more than a conqueror. And it's just like, just that message. That's why I love the movie so much, because it not only it helps me with my mental health, but it also helps me with my relationship with God to give me that constant reminder that despite how much trauma you have had, or how many compulsive thoughts come into your mind, or all this anxiety and this depression, and just remind yourself that you are a child of God and you can overcome so many things that life may throw at you.
Wow. I really appreciate, like, there are just so many like words of wisdom that you just said, and especially like with just remembering who you are as a person. Like, that also sticks with me from that movie, because it's so easy to forget. You know, like, especially when you're going through like so many things all at once, and it's just so easy to just get into that low state and berate yourself and just think that you're not gonna get through it and you're not gonna amount to anything.
Right.
And I just want to encourage people who are listening, like, you are not your situation. Like,
Right.
you are not your diagnosis, and
Mhm.
you are also not going to be held back because of something that you went through.
Right.
And I just really love that depiction in the movie where it's like Rafiki's just trying to reassure Simba that
Mhm.
you have your father in you. Like, all this time, you've
Right.
had your father in you. Like, from since you were a child, like, he's been with you. He's been like teaching you, guiding you along the way. And even as an adult, and I love the scene where Mufasa just comes in the form of
Oh,
like
a
a cloud,
cloud.
and it's just
Yes.
like this wonderful vision of Mufasa telling Simba, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but like, snap out of it, because like, he's just saying like, hey dude, like, you're my son, remember who
Mhm.
you are, remember your legacy, you
Mhm.
are the true king, you are
Mhm.
not who your circumstances have made you to be, like, you are the heir to the throne. You need to reclaim your position and your title. And I just love that scene because Simba's like, how can I go back? I'm not who I used to be, you know?
Mm,
And he's just like,
right.
I can't connect to that person that I
Mhm.
was before because I've just been just so messed up by all my present circumstances. And in a way, I kind of feel the same way sometimes, where it's like I wish I could go back in time to the person that I was before I
Right.
got diagnosed with bipolar
Mm.
disorder. And I just wish that sometimes I could reconnect with the past quote unquote version of myself. Um just because I believe that I was just better off before having this diagnosis, you know?
Mhm.
And I just love that, message of like, no, you need to remember who you actually are on the inside,
Mhm.
not just who you think you should be or who others think you should be,
Right.
but who you actually are. And I really
Mhm.
love that message. And it just hits me on such a personal level because it's just so easy to just take your eyes off of who you're supposed to be
Mhm.
and just look at all the things that you're not, you know?
Right.
So I
I
really
think
love that.
that's really special to think about because uh during that scene, this is how I'm a fanatic. But during that scene, it's like when you go back to the beginning of the movie and Simba's with
Mm.
Mufasa and he's like, look at the stars and stuff. I realized from all the times I'm watching this movie that when Mufasa came into the clouds, like that whole time he talked to him, there was no stars in the sky, but there were
Mm.
stars in the sky when he was talking to Rafiki and even after.
Huh.
And I was just like, wow, because like the sun, quote unquote, is like the biggest star in the galaxy. So
Uh,
it's like I think that's also like a good metaphor to think about because it's like he's been looking up in the sky, and even when he was with Timon and Pumbaa, he was just looking at the stars, and he's like, even in The Lion King on Broadway, Endless Night, where he's like, you promised you always be there wherever I needed you, and you know he's just he's like Mufasa, like, dad, where are you?
mm.
And I think we also struggle with that too when we're having so much trials and tribulations. We're just like, God, where are you?
Yeah.
Like you said, you'll never leave me nor forsake me, and I'm just alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also very important to be reminded that we're never alone.
Yeah.
And God's always with us, even through mental breakdowns, mental health, traumatic issues, or anxiety, depression, um even autism and every other mental health situation that you're going through. It's just always be reminded that like you're not alone. And I think that's like the beauty of like thinking about your disorder in a different way. Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be considered as a disorder, it could just
Mm-hmm.
be considered as like this period that it'll be over soon.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I definitely agree with you on that. Like,
Mhm.
it's very important to just remember that, um like, you're not alone, as Sam was saying. Like, You have, if you believe in Jesus, you have Jesus. You have like all that support, but you also have support in your community, maybe in
Mm-hmm.
your friend groups, you know, or your mental health professionals. Like they're all there to support you as well. So
Absolutely.
you aren't alone. So I love that message.
Well, you are not alone.
Oh my god. But I do kind of like the Broadway. You mentioned the Broadway show.
Mm.
So I want to segue into that. But
Mm.
before I ask the question, I do want to say, like, we got to see The Lion King on Broadway. Biggest flex. Anyway, like we finally got to see The Lion King. It was like what, 2022? 2022?
October, I think 2022 or
Yeah,
1.
2022. It was 2022. It was. Anyway, whatever. We saw it. That's all that matters.
Damn.
But but we saw it. We saw it, and it was like really amazing. Like I just felt so blessed to have witnessed like such
It
creativity.
was 21. I was correct.
Oh, all right. I like how you just did the fact check like right now. But it's fine. Wow, y'all see what I gotta deal with. Anyway, but yeah, it was just like the magnitude and
Mm.
just the it was just awe-inspiring to just see the animated film come to life with like such vibrancy, like with the costumes, the music. Oh my god, the music is incredible. The performances were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just such a touching experience, and it was the best experience, one of the best experience of my life so far. And in light of that, I do want to ask Sam, first off, I want to ask you what your thoughts were on the show, and
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask, like, how did the Broadway play elevate the story of the original movie, or in some ways make it better than the film adaptation, if that's your opinion?
Mm. Wow. I think I love both. Cause I don't know. I just really love The Lion King, but I think just one aspect of the Broadway show that I really, really like was the addition of I can't remember who. Oh, I think it was Timon who fell, and
Mhm.
Simba was just reminded of like the scene where Mufasa fell, and I think it was like when Simba like tried to like cover his ears and his eyes, and the lights were just shotting red because it's just like
Mm.
that trigger moment.
Yeah.
And I think the movie should have done more of that, like more of that
Mhm.
approach. Um and it's just really, really, wow, like powerful, because I know exactly how that feels, because it's like when you see a trigger, especially a traumatic experience that triggers your memory, you kind of blank out and you just want to be away from it because you just can't think about it anymore because of how hurtful it was. And I think that the Broadway show really, really went into depth about Simba, especially in his life with Timon and Pumbaa, because I feel like people don't really look deep into Timon and Pumbaa, because it was kind of, you know, their idea to save Simba. Like they didn't even know
Mm.
he was like the king of Pride Rock. So
Mm.
the fact that going off on a limb with Lion King 1.5, but if it wasn't for Timon, like asking to bowl for buzzards with Pumbaa, like if he said no, I'm not gonna do it.
Well, Pumbaa was asking Timon. He was begging Timon practically. He's
Yes.
like, please, 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 could we just like, run into the buzzards and like make them fly away or whatever? And then Timon is just like, fine. Like, if he didn't,
Yeah. If he didn't say one more run won't change our lives,
right.
it really did. um,
Spoke too soon.
literally. And I just think that the Broadway show really like showed that aspect of mental health, and also with Scar too, like we saw Scar, like not only he not only he just wanted to be king, but in The Madness of Scar, it's one of the songs, he said, Zazu, why am I not loved? And I'm like, oh, this
Mm.
is deep.
Yeah, yeah.
This is super deep. And I think that also because Scar also has a visible disability, like he has his scar. I mean, he wasn't born with it. He got it from, I can't really remember how he got
That's
it,
all the
but
Lion King lore, but go
but
ahead.
it's just the fact that even like his depiction of visible disability with having a scar was also like misrepresented. So you have PTSD with Simba as the hero with good representation, and why is Scar, who has like a disability of a scar on his face, like why is he depicted badly? It's
I mean,
like,
he did do some bad things, but go ahead.
yeah, but that doesn't like I don't think that kind of like justifies like
Yeah,
what he did, and
right.
so a lot of the times media has like stereotypes like, oh, if you have a scar you're evil,
Mhm.
or oh, if you like have like a disproportional face you're evil, and
Mhm.
all of that. So I think it's just like, it goes to show like, why am I not loved? And I feel like
Mm.
a lot of disabled people in real life feel that way. They're just like, why am I not loved? Like, is it
Mm.
because I'm different? Is it because what am I doing wrong? And it's clearly nothing to do with your disability or your mental health disorder, in a sense. Like, you not being able to be around people, for example, me, like I get very isolated when I meet new people, and I'm just like, oh my god, is something wrong with me? Like, am I doing something wrong? And I feel like that also can take a toll, especially. And I really enjoy how the Broadway musical brought that out, because he's like, okay, if I'm a king, everyone's supposed to love me. And
Mm.
now he's king and he's like, I'm not getting what I want, and I'm not
Mm.
loved. Like, what do I need to feel loved? Like, why was Mufasa loved and I'm not? I did everything. I killed the man
Oh
just
God.
to be loved and adored. And the fact that
Wow.
I'm not getting at, like, and it's literally called The Madness of Scar, because that's literally where his mind shifted. Like, he's
Mhm.
like, at this point I just want to be loved, I just want to be adored, and I'll do anything. Like, he even went after Nala. Like,
Oh
he
gosh.
he he did anything that he could just to feel loved. And
Yeah.
I love how the Broadway musical really dove deep into both Simba and both Scar
Yeah.
than the movie.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Because I didn't even like put two and two together with like Scar and how he must have been feeling with his like physical scar. I mean, even his physical body didn't even look like all the other lions. Like
Mm-hmm.
he looked like, well, I mean, he is the villain. But he looked very different from
Right.
everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
like kind of like deformed in a way or defective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the times it's like we don't really give like thought to people who may be handicapped or
Right.
just may have like a physical disability that could also impact their mental capacity as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because having a physical like disability could really take a toll on the mind as well,
Mm-hmm.
you know
Absolutely.
and people ridiculing other people just because they're like amputated or
Mm-hmm.
they're like deformed or they have like some like visible scarring, like just because people may look this way. And I mean, we are kind of getting better at like being inclusive for people who have disabilities, but still it is an issue where you are looked at automatically differently
Yeah, more
because of
work
it.
needs to be done.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. No, of course.
Yeah, we even talked about this in my disability in film and literature course at Fordham. Professor Shuby, I love you. Um, but we talked about that depiction of, visible disabilities versus invisible, and it just really shows that media would I think do anything to get people to they're just like, oh, we have like this character who's disabled, and that's the best representation because we put them there, not the fact that it's good or bad representation. And I think that's like where we falter in the media.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see that point. Like, I really appreciate that as well. But Sam, I have been so honored to have you on the podcast. But before we go, I want to ask you one last question. So, what advice or words of encouragement do you have for those who are struggling with mental health issues?
Advice.
Or words of encouragement?
I guess just despite everything that's going on in your life, just keep pushing forward. It will be hard. I'm not saying it will be easy. But just having people that surround you, like positivity, let that overtake you, because it's like, sometimes we're in such big slumps and we can't get up from them, but just having that sense that, I can do this, because if I did it before, I could do it again. And another thing I told you many times, and I know a lot of people probably heard it too, that I've said it too, and I always say, just give God the ball. Because it's like sometimes we think that God gives us certain things, we're just like, oh yeah, I got it, I could shoot my shot. And you shoot the shot, you think you're gonna make a 3-pointer, and you don't even make no pointers. And so God's like, give it to me, like he literally said, cast your burdens onto me because I care for you. And like, I think we're just so accustomed to like casting so much on people, and they don't care for you back. And I think that's where we falter, because it's just like, God is completely different because he's our heavenly Father. So if you give God like the ball, let him make the shot, because he's like, give me all your burdens because I love you. And another thing that's on my mind to give words of encouragement, you're never alone. So yeah, there's gonna be other people out there who are going through the same thing that you're going through, and it's just good to know that you're not alone, because again, you're never alone. Like, you have family, you have friends, you even probably have your significant other or your pet, or just close friends and family members, and most importantly, God, in your back corner, just cheering you on from the sidelines. And so I think that's very important, especially for anybody who's dealing with any mental health situations. And just that feeling of never being alone is just really important. So yeah.
Yeah, well, Sam, I have been again honored to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for just like keeping us up to date with our Lion King lore. Like, you went into like the entire like filmography and shows. Like, thank you for that. And I also appreciate your heart, and you are wise beyond your years. So thank you so much for sharing all that wisdom. And guys, stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to Rough Edges. This podcast is available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and more. For more updates on the Rough Edges podcast, please follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast. You can also visit the official podcast website at www.roughedgespodcast.com. If you have any questions or further suggestions for how this podcast can grow, please email at rough.edges.podcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful day.